Turn your living room into a joyful, hands-free playroom with CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ. Your child sings, moves, and learns right alongside JJ and friends, all on the big screen. It's designed thoughtfully to spark speech, rhythm, and coordination through songs and active play. Try an ad-free, safe, and interactive way to make screen time part of their learning and growth. Parents love how easy it is, voice-controlled and frustration-free. Kids love every moment of singing, laughing, and playing along. It's fun for them, and it's feel-good for you. Available now in the Volley app on your smart TV. Just search Volley in your TV's app store and start your free trial of CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ today. That's CoComelon Sing and Play with JJ. Available now in the Volley app on your smart TV. Search Volley and start your free trial today.
Volley. Welcome to Homeschooling Outside the Box, the podcast that encourages and equips moms to homeschool an outside-the-box child. Hello, everybody. Today I've got Andrew Pudewa, Director of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, on the show with me. I assume most of you don't need me to go over this introduction because you probably know who Andrew Pudewa is, and it is a joy to have him on the show today. Andrew, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hello. It's good to be with you, Cindy. Looking forward to this.
So I had Andrew on specifically because I love a lot of IEW's products, but I also love all of his ideas on communicating. So your passion has really been about creating effective communicators. I know you've talked a lot about that, but before we get into all that, Andrew, if you would give just kind of a quick background on how you got to where you're at today for those who might not be familiar with you.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. I'm a homeschooling dad, although all of my 7 children are grown. And I have 11 grandchildren with a rumored 12th on the way. Almost all of our kids were at home for almost all of their years. I occasionally, usually in some kind of effort to save my wife's sanity, put a child in a school for a short period of time. Only every time I discovered that, every time I tried that, I discovered that I still have to teach them everything anyway. It's just expensive babysitting. I don't know. Right. So my background is in music. I am a Suzuki violin teacher by primary profession. I've taught kinder music classes and was very active in the world of early childhood music education for about the first half of my adult life. And I really just kind of stumbled into this business of writing seminars and discovered that it could be more profitable than trying to sell hours for dollars when you could talk to lots of people at one time and also create products. And so there was a transition period between 1995 and 2000 where I was still teaching music full-time and trying to build IEW into a little bit of a business. And then by 2000, it became a full-time work for me. And then now, 19 years later, we have 42 employees. So something I never imagined would happen. Some of your listeners might be familiar with Suzuki Method. And so I was trained by Dr. Suzuki. I lived in Japan for 3 years. And when I saw this writing program at a teacher training conference that I was attending in Canada, I said, that is a Suzuki method for teaching English composition. It has all of the foundational elements based on imitation, graded repertoire, mastery learning approach, super positive, attitude, 1-point teaching. All of these things I knew that worked very well in music instruction. Now I was learning could be applied to teaching writing. So I was working in a small school in Montana at the time. I came back. I started teaching some writing classes to the kids in the school and those on the side. And it was going very well. And then moved to California, tried something a little different. And then in 1995, this school said, would you come back and do a little workshop for our teachers on that writing program you learned when you were working for us, years before? And I did. And there were a couple homeschool parents in that little network. And they said, well, this is the best thing we've ever seen. And I was desperate to try and, get some kind of side business that could make the financial stress a little less. And I did my first seminar in Seattle in 1995 and kept going.
Wow, that is amazing. And now, of course, we have IEW, the Institute for Excellence in Writing, which I know is such a strong and formal name. I hate to not use it enough, but it's quicker. So now we've got all these awesome products from you guys. And so you're saying really a lot of that in the beginning was birthed from you recognizing that it lined up with the Suzuki method. And I know that's what we really love about it, the mastery approach, that, all those things that you had mentioned, that that's kind of the fruit that we're seeing from IEW, right?
Yes. We have, the results have astounded me. Honestly, I never imagined this would be what it was. But because of the power of video, I've been able to teach this writing system, writing method of teaching writing to parents and teachers and children all over the world, probably now into the hundreds of thousands of people. And just the amazing testimonials we continuously get from people who say, I had a kid who hated writing, couldn't write, autistic, dyslexic,
Right.
I have no idea what to do. I have an elementary ed degree and I have no idea how to teach writing to kids. And you helped me so much. And my child got a full scholarship. My kid won an essay contest. All of these things that are just flying in at us now so fast we can't even log them. I mean, early days I'd keep every precious little testimonial,
Right.
there's something I can prove myself with. But
Right.
at this point, the fruit is so magnificent. And of course, I all glory to God. This is not something I take particular claim for,
Sure.
either creating the system or being brilliant or being a good businessman. I'm actually none of those things.
But you're willing.
I stumbled into it, and I'm willing. And as God wishes, He can continue to bless what we do and help us solve our problems. And I'm in it for the long haul. I expect to do it till I die.
And we hope you do. So I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so in one of your early talks, and you'll have to correct me on the title, Effective Communicators. Please tell me the exact title.
Title, almost all the times that I've done it, has been Nurturing Competent Communicators.
Thank you. And I will link to that in the show notes. If you haven't gotten to enjoy that, you can check that out. But in that, I believe it was that talk where you tell the story, if you will, please, about if a new mom came up to you with a newborn baby and they asked you for your one tip, what would it be?
Yeah, if I always say, if you walked up to me with a baby in your arms, said, I wish this child to be an excellent speaker and writer of the English language 20 years from now, what should I do?
Yes.
This is the talk you would get. And it's really a two-part talk. The first half or so, I go into great detail about the importance of building the language database through reading out loud to children in huge quantity.
Even big kids, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. In fact, never stop. But that is the number one predictor, in my experience, of being an adult who writes well. I get people coming to me at a conference. They'll say, I write pretty well. I mean, I think I do. And I always got A's on my papers, but I don't remember learning how to do it. And I don't know how to teach it. And I will say, well, did your parents read to you when you were growing up? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, yeah, come to think of it, yeah, my dad read the Reader's Digest every night at the dinner table, or something like that.
Sure.
Because that is how you get the high quality, reliably correct and sophisticated grammar, syntax, um, literary devices and expressions, vocabulary, everything that's going to make you a good communicator is built into your brain. And the primary method of acquiring it is through literature, through the ear. Sadly, these days, a lot of people have been brainwashed, partly by schools, actually, that it is more important for kids to read on their own. So there's
Mm,
this push, 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 get this kid reading, and
right.
then they can read on their own. But the problem there is you can read to a child at a level, right, much higher than his or her own decoding skills.
Sure.
So you can put in a much higher uh, quantity as well as quality of raw language information. And so, I always say, just to counteract the negative environment of, obsessions with technology and amusement, entertainment, visual overstimulation, busy families without time, just to counteract the modern world, you probably need to read to children a couple hours a day if you can possibly swing it. And if not,
Sure.
supplement that with audiobooks and never stop. See, we do
Right.
tend to think, oh, this child can read on their own. Okay, well, that you go read Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to yourself, and that'll free me up to do, Ping in the beautiful Yangtze River here one more time with the 4-year-old. So we tend to favor younger children. But I would
Right.
argue it's at that age when kids start to read more on their own that you most want to read to them above their own level of challenge, thus pushing, the more eloquent, sophisticated language and building that database. It's the most important thing that any parent can do on any given day.
I love that. And we've certainly seen that with our two of the children. I have four. So two of them are coming to mind as you're talking. One, we have, and I know you'll relate to this because of your background, we have a 10-year-old who has dyslexia. And this child could not read well until very recently, but he absorbed audiobooks like a sponge. And it was that constant input that you're talking about, and his vocabulary, the way he speaks, you would never know that he even has
Yeah.
a struggle with the language. And then my other son that is coming to mind is Benjamin, one who's on the autism spectrum. When he was first diagnosed when he was 3, his language was about 80% echolalic. So, he was speaking, and we would get that all the time from, unknowing people, and they'd say, oh, well, he talks, so he must be fine. I'm like, have you listened to anything he's saying? It's right out of the movie Toy Story or right out of a Blue's Clues. That, he's just having these canned responses. He's on like auto reply email. And you would ask him something and you would just get like a line from a movie or something in response. He's like, it seems like you want me to say something. How about this? Does this apply? And so expanding his vocabulary was a big deal for us. And we've always been passionate about reading aloud. I'm a writer, so that's kind of part of the territory. Writers read, like that's just, they go hand in hand. So that was a passion of mine early on with the kids, to read aloud and read often. And then of course you and Sarah McKenzie, you guys fueled that fire. The more I would listen to things that said, man, keep going, don't stop once they can read on their own. So we've always been passionate about that. But with Benjamin, his vocabulary, he got into the stage where he was like copying word for word classic literature, so he'd have like A Christmas Carol spread out by Dickens, not like an abridged, and he'd be copying word for word, and all of that seeped into his vocabulary, and his expressive language has expanded so much. It's unreal, and I credit that largely to reading aloud and just all that great language going in. It's, you can't get, what do you say? You can't get out what you don't put in.
Right. You can't get some
yeah,
out of a brain that isn't in there to begin with.
that it
So we
isn't
have
in there.
to
Right.
work on the
Exactly.
input side. And I think that's one of the greatest advantages of homeschooling is
Yeah.
that you can give your child such a better language development environment. You think about a school, the number one influence in a school is not the teacher, it's peers, right?
Right.
The
Right.
number two influence may or may not be technology or the teacher, but they're a close one and two there. And then the
Sure.
teacher, of course, is dealing with 20 some kids all at once. And she doesn't have time to read to her class for an hour a day, when that's
Right.
probably, especially in your elementary, even middle school, that's probably the most valuable thing that could happen. But no, they got to get ready for all those standardized tests and teach
Right.
to the curriculum, and the teachers are so busy, and then the kids don't get it at home. It's like impoverishing. But
Right.
we who have time with our kids at home and make it a priority, we see the blessings. The other thing, the other half of the talk, you probably remember, is about the value of memorizing language.
Yes.
Learning
Yes.
by heart poetry, scripture. As kids
Mm-hmm.
get a little older, excerpts from famous speeches, getting involved in drama, doing
Yes.
maybe even competitive, speech and debate. That type of committing to memory, high quality, eloquent language, is the other side of the the, the making it solid. You get it in through hearing, and you make it solid by speaking. And and so I'm a huge proponent of children memorizing poetry, and one of my favorite things that I ever created. I had no idea it would be as successful as it has been, but I did it because I knew the value and I wanted people to do it. Is my catchy title here: Linguistic Development Through Poetry Memorization.
I love it.
It's kind of like a Suzuki method for poetry memorization, because the kids start in book one, level one. They memorize a
Mm-hmm.
poem. They say it every day while they memorize another poem. They say those two poems every day while they memorize a third poem. They say
Yeah.
every poem they've ever memorized every day until they run out of time, and then start alternating and build up a database of 40, 60, 80. If you
Yeah.
did this program the way it is, you'd have 80 poems and 20 excerpts from famous speeches, probably with lifetime retention.
That's amazing. And that it is so valuable. And I have to confess, I don't have that one yet, but I think and poetry was my first love ever. I mean, that I just have such a heart, and so I knew early on I wanted them to memorize. I wanted, scripture and poetry. And so we've for years we just have a little index card box. This is how we do it. But there is something so joyful about watching them, and especially the boys, and I know this is one of your favorites, recite Jabberwocky and
Yes,
just
yes.
and then or Trees by oh, the name is not
Joyce
James Joyce.
Kilmer?
Joyce Kilmer, thank you. I always want to say James Joyce. I'm like, that's wrong. And we've even in our homeschool group, we've started to do something we're calling Feast. And so every 3 months we rotate through recitation 1 month, and then a book club the second month, and then poetry and tea is the third month. And so those have been so exciting to watch these little kids who maybe don't want to get up and say anything, but they've got these poems memorized. And, once it's a part of you, it's so much easier to express it. And that's been really fun to watch my children have these poems and have the scripture stored up in their hearts. And I think it does help them to be more effective when they're communicating, because those ideas really become a part of their ideas and what they
Yeah.
think and who they are.
And it's a great vocabulary expander. You were talking about your
Yes.
son, and you worked a lot on vocabulary, so that memorization and recitation, I'm sure, was hugely beneficial. So that's that talk, Nurturing Comedy Communicators. And it's one of my favorite, most important messages to give. I keep doing it. Whenever I get to a conference, if they'll put it on the menu, I'll do it.
Right.
And you can listen to it online. And I think it's often the case where parents, they know the truth, but then they
Yeah.
get busy and they
Yes.
need to prioritize.
Right. Well, and there's all these outside voices saying it's not that important. I know you talk a lot about how to help our children become effective communicators, but why is it so important, do you think?
Oh, so
in
yeah.
10 minutes or less. Yeah, no.
Well,
I know that could be
um,
its own talk.
I do have a talk that kind of explains the relationship between the arts of language.
Mhm.
I was in a conversation with a superintendent of a school district in Eastern Washington State where I was helping, training their teachers. And I knew
Yeah.
this guy was super smart, not just because he had a doctorate degree, but because he was homeschooling his own children, even though he was the superintendent of a school district.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And
a statement.
I said to him, I don't like the term language arts. Because it kind of conjures up a lot of yucky stuff,
Absolutely. Yeah.
handwriting and spelling and grammar and, phonics and literature. And, it's a long list of yucky stuff. And I don't like the term. And I said that to him. And he said to me, well, that's because you don't know what they are. And
Oh.
I took a little humble pill there and said, well, okay, what are they? And he said, well, in a more classical sense, in a more natural sense, there's 4 language arts, and they are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And then he pointed out that the latter 2, reading and writing, are very much dependent on the former 2, listening and speaking. And then he said the most interesting thing. He said, our problem in public education is we try very hard to teach reading and writing because we can test them, but we don't do well at cultivating listening and speaking skills because there's no assessments. Isn't that interesting?
That is, yes, definitely.
So I worked on this idea a lot. I created a talk called The 4 Language Arts where I spent about 15 minutes talking about each one of them. The brief summary of that would be, okay, think about it. If you're going to speak, all of your speaking is dependent on the language you've acquired through listening. So the higher quality listening, the better speaking, right? Listening is also an active thing. Everybody hears, but you learn to listen better.
Right.
Through music, through being read to, through conversation, right?
Yes.
Speaking, everybody talks, but speaking is intentional. We speak to someone, we speak for someone, we speak about someone, but our speaking is dependent on the vocabulary and language information that we acquire through listening.
Right.
Then think about reading. Now, to read something, you have to decode letters and use your phonics information to try and figure out what that word is if you don't already recognize it. And then you have to basically say that word to yourself. And then you have to figure out the next word and say that word to yourself. And so you're essentially talking to yourself while you're reading, right?
Right.
So then you have to hear what you're saying to yourself.
Right.
So listening and speaking are fundamental to reading, right? Then take it one step further. Writing. Well, how do you write something? First, you got to have an idea. The idea can be external to you or internal to you, but there's got to be an idea. You then have to get that idea into words. If the idea pre-existed in words, that's a whole lot easier. If the idea was somewhat abstract or image or imagination, that's harder, but you've got to attach the words to the idea. Then you've got to say that idea to yourself. Then you've got to hear what you say to yourself, and you've got to hold it in your memory long enough to write down the first word and not forget the rest of it.
Right. And if I can interject real quick, I just want parents listening to appreciate everything you just said, just that whole process, because I think we get so stuck in like, well, it's just writing, just write this, and we, especially with our kids with language delays, especially with our children with all these, the autism, dyslexia, all these really heavy communication challenges. I think you forget there's like 10 steps involved. It's not just writing. It's not just speaking. There's all these other things that have to be happening either first or simultaneously, and it's very difficult.
And one of the things we've observed over the years is that some approaches to teaching writing basically say, okay, give the kid paper and he'll think of something, and then he can write it down. So in other words, you have to be able to think of something in order to learn to write. Well, what if you can't? What if you have a kid who says, I can't think of anything, or I don't know what to say? Well, you have to. Well, I can't. You're dead in the
Right.
water. Whereas with our system, as you know, we give kids source text. Here, represent this information.
Yes.
Here, retell this story. Here's stuff to work with. So that in our way of looking at it, you teach them to write, and in the process, you gradually improve their thinking skills. Think of something so you can write. No, write so you can learn to think. So a few years ago, we redid our logo and our tagline that's under the logo. And so now it's IEW, and then below it says, listen, speak, read,
Mm-hmm.
write, think. So
Yeah.
that's really our mission. Our, on the appearance, we look like we just teach people, one of the basic skills like writing, but under it, we're actually teaching thinking skills, which be a bit
Yes.
subversive.
Right. And I think what is so critical about your program too is and here's a shout out for all the Charlotte Masoners, it is content, the quality of the content, wouldn't you agree, is so critical? Because I could say, okay, well, I could put this, and I won't knock anybody, but some twaddly chunk of a paragraph down and have them go through similar steps, but you're not going to achieve excellent high quality writing without first there's that input again. I mean, what you're putting in has to be of high quality, correct?
Yeah. And I am very much, I am a huge fan of Charlotte Mason, and everything she wrote makes so much sense.
Yes.
And she's kind of like the educational apostle of common sense.
You're right.
That's how I would describe it. And I do agree that a lot of times we try to teach children writing before they're ready, and
Yes.
that could be very, very harmful. The
Yeah.
schools are pushing reading before children are ready,
Yes.
and that just causes kids to hate both of those things. There's absolutely no correlation between early reading and success in life, even
Right.
academic success. You get kids who read it, they don't read till they're 8. They can be every bit as successful academically. You get kids who don't start writing till they're 8 or 9. That's okay, because that's who they are. And I just have seen again and again some ill effects of trying to force something that is not developmentally appropriate simply because a child is, a certain age, or because the state mandates it or something. So
Absolutely.
I really think every parent should get a good dose of Charlotte Mason common sense.
Yeah.
Hopefully while their kids are still young enough that they can use it. And
Right.
I've talked a lot about her idea of narration, of giving the children a formal
Yes.
opportunity to narrate back their experience.
It's built into IEW. That's one of the things I love about it.
Yep.
The whole narrate and oral narration, and that's, you start the bullet point, the outline is like, I mean, that's you're including so many of those components in the program. And that's one of the best parts, in my opinion.
Well, and it's interesting because there's truth in all things. There's common
Right.
sense in all things. Although, as G.K. Chesterton noted, common sense is often most uncommon.
Yeah.
It's so lacking in progressive education.
Right.
And yet, kind of truth is truth. I saw the truth of Suzuki method. I was attracted. I was drawn to it. I saw this is a good and true way to teach writing. I read Charlotte Mason. I saw the truth there. I've, read some Montessori. I've read some, classical education stuff. And, there's a fabric of truth that connects all of these things. So,
Sure.
people kind of get in their happy place, and that's good. But I think if we, as parents, keep looking for the simple, common sense,
Yes.
honest, true way to do things, then we will always be guided as best as we can be.
I agree with that. Yeah. And not getting too wrapped up in overcomplicating it, or I have to do it this one way because this is my favorite person that I've ever read. I mean, I think the common sense thing and working with your specific children. So let me ask you this. Speaking of special needs children and, the autism, the ADHD, the dyslexia, that's sort of that's our camp. So when I say special needs, that's what I think of. I know that does not encapsulate all special needs, but we want our children to be effective communicators. And it's important, for a lot of reasons, but being believers, you want, you think of the charge in Matthew, now go make disciples of all nations. I feel like God can do anything he wants, but I think it'd be great if we could communicate with people. I feel like that would be helpful to communicate. So there's that side of it. But then, of course, there's just making the whole person. And you think of how much more relationship driven the world would be, or, our child's lives would be if they could communicate more effectively. So what are your thoughts on, like we were saying, why it's important, but specifically keeping in mind special needs kids and knowing that that is a lot of times the primary struggle. What are your thoughts on how we might tweak it or look at it differently?
Well, one thing that I believe, one of the great blessings of having a child who struggles in anything is that one of the things they learn is how to struggle and persist and attain victory.
Yes.
Kids who are super smart and everything's easy for them and they float through school without any effort, they make parents and teachers proud and happy, but they're not necessarily growing in the same way as a child who really has to work hard, whether it's, reading or writing. I first thought about this with music. I had violin students would come and, there's always a spectrum. On one end, there's kids who pick the thing up and they have a good ear and they practice well and they kind of sail through and look great and make me look like a great teacher. And then there's other kids that, they would really have to work a lot harder, and they would make slower progress. And, the temptation is to say, well, maybe it's not worth doing music with those kids because, they're not going to be as good. But no, the truth that I saw was that the doing it for those kids perhaps had even more value because they were growing in intangible ways. They were gaining determination. They were making goals. They were working through the challenge. And so, I think that is an important thing for us to keep in mind when we do have kids that, have any of these issues you've mentioned. Another thing that I think is good about having kids that have challenges and special needs, it gets you free of this idea that because a child is a certain age, they should have a certain ability. Right? Our whole system is fundamentally disordered, where we age segregate children and then we insist that by merit of being 10 years old, they all do the same thing. They could be born on the same day and you're still going to see quite a range of aptitude difference. When we acknowledge that, then we don't worry about where is my child in relation to, other children of an approximately the same age. Does he read as well? Does he write as well? Does he spell as well? Does he know math as well? That becomes irrelevant. What matters is, does he write better, spell better, read better than he did 3 months ago in comparison to himself, right? The thing that really matters is he or she improving, not comparing him with other children. This is why the whole world would be a better world if all teachers were music teachers first. Right? Because music teachers don't ever worry, oh no, you have to start violin at 5.5 or you'll be forever behind. Ridiculous. You can start at 4, you can start at 14, you can start at 40. I've had students of all ages start. A second thing we don't do is say, oh no, that other 10-year-old, well, she's in book 3 and you're still in book 2, so you're failing. You're behind. No, nobody would think that way. And, honestly, I don't care whether it takes you 6 months or 2 years to get through book 1. If you get through book one, that is an accomplishment you can be proud of. You are a better violinist than if you had not done that. And that's all that matters. So I think in homeschooling, we do have this temptation to label our kids by a grade and compare them with other kids of the same grade or age. But sometimes that special needs kid comes along and will break you free of the
Yeah.
necessity of doing that because it's not even reasonable to think that way.
That is exactly, I mean, free was, you hit the nail on the head, because I am an academic by nature. I love school. I've always thrived academically because I enjoy that. So then when I get these children and I think, okay, well, I do what I think makes sense at the time. And I mean, it was a train wreck, like just, it became very clear very quickly that whatever I thought I knew how to do was not going to work in this situation. So, it forces you to, well, I guess you could go two ways. You could just clamp up and, get very rigorous, just try to force it upon the child and continue to fail. Or you could, like you said, just be free, just be totally free of it and think, wow, I can just look at this child and say, what does he need? Where is he at? And look at them individually. And that is a freedom that we get to enjoy more with homeschool. But I love what you said about that and what you said about the victories. I've always thought that, with the boys, when they would achieve something socially, when they would have an interaction or they would play soccer or something that is probably normal for most families. But when our son did it, it was like, oh my goodness, like throw a party, it was such a big deal. And my husband and I said, the victories are so much sweeter when you have kids with special needs, because proportionally how much more difficult that was and how much more they've really achieved, so to speak, having that experience.
And in terms of communication skills, I point out, I would say I meet a good number of boys, mostly boys, often between the ages of, say, 11 and 14, who will say straight to my face, I hate writing. And I will say, well, I do too. It's hard work. And there's no rule that says you have to like it. That's not part of this. The thing you have to do is learn to do it half decently, because it will open doors for you, whether you go into the military or garbage collecting or engineering, right?
Right.
If you're an engineer and you're a good engineer, you'll remain an engineer because you're good at it. It's the good engineer who also can communicate writing, in written and spoken form, engineering ideas. He becomes the vice president. He moves into the world
Right.
of being able to influence and lead. So wherever you are, the people who have the leadership capability are almost always people who have good communication skills. So if we
Right.
want to bring the light of Christ into the culture, into the business world, back into education, spread ministry, I think that's probably one of the greatest arguments for attending to the teaching of the language arts, the arts of language, as I prefer to call them, um, as best we possibly can. We don't know what the Lord has in store for that child when he's old and takes up a role, but if we want to maximize his opportunity to influence and to bring God's truth into the world, then that to me is the number one reason to make communication a high priority in education.
Absolutely. I think it's something we can so easily take for granted in America, especially because we have all these opportunities and we have the privilege of hating writing, and then you think of wasn't it Frederick Douglass who memorized like copious amounts of speeches because he knew to be free was to read, to think, to have ideas. And you look at any society where a tyrant has come in and take over, and that's the first thing they're trying to get rid of is thinking. They don't want anybody thinking.
George Orwell made this astoundingly clear in his book 1984, where the most important work of the controlling government, the party, was to shrink the vocabulary of the
Yes.
people. And the idea is if you could shrink the language enough, you could eliminate thought crime. Book everyone should read every 10 years.
So let me ask you this, because I know you've got a shop full of awesome products. What would you say would be your, I don't know, like top 2 or 3 favorites? I know you already said the poetry, but in terms of somebody's hearing this, they've never heard of it before, they're going to go check it out. Name a couple products that would really help this whole becoming an effective communicator idea.
Yeah, our flagship product is a teacher training course, so it's for you, the parent, and it's called Teaching Writing, Structure and Style. Probably take you about 15 hours of your time. It's a video course with a seminar workbook, and it's me teaching our whole system of structural models and stylistic techniques and how to teach that to anyone. And that's really where, it was the first product that we ever had, and it is still the most important thing that we do. A lot of people want to buy something and throw it at their kids and try to hope they learn something, administer curriculum. We don't see good success there. We see that you teach something well if you've learned it yourself and really understand it. So we've always focused on, teaching the parent, the tutor, the teacher, the mentor, whoever's going to be doing it first. Once you've learned that system, then we have different ways to help you. We have student videos called Student Writing Intensive. We have some books of lesson plans called the theme-based writing lesson books. I think you might have used one of those.
I was just going to say, I've got to make sure and plug the myths, fables, and fairy tales. Am I saying those in the right order?
Yeah, fables, myths, and fairy
okay.
tales. That's a good one. Yeah.
That was so much fun. And I have to tell you, one of my proudest mama moments was during that book. So the other twin who's on the spectrum, Jackson, and he's a little higher functioning, but had never spoken in front of a group when we were doing this curriculum a few years back. And so we got to, you guys have built in, I love this. It's a fable festival. And, you encourage them to dress up and make invitations. And it's this whole thing, that they've got to host and invite people. And it was so cool to watch him open up and be receptive to this and put it together. And he really took the reins and ran with it. And he'd been working on his narrations, so he had all the fables that he was going to present. And Fight a Family, he put together a menu. We had food. And I thought, I really don't know how this is going to go. I really thought, I don't know, is he going to remember to look up when he, was speaking and look down at the note card and pause? And he got up there and he knocked it out of the park. I could not, I was seriously shocked. I thought, I cannot believe
what joy.
He did that well, but I just feel like he was so prepared that it was just kind of the natural next step. And so that was a huge event for us. And I love that was built into the program, that was part of it, that opportunity.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that story. And yeah, a little bit of experience like that when you're young can go a long ways to building a lifetime confidence in doing that type of thing. And what one of my mentors, Mrs. Ingham, would have called the intangibles of education. You see, a product, but behind that is all sorts of growth and things that you couldn't necessarily even name that are helping to form and shape that aptitude for lifetime. So the theme-based, we have, I think, the best grammar program out there. We won for the first time the Practical Homeschooling Reader Awards in the grammar category.
Oh.
We'd won writing solid since 1999. I mean, I've never not been first place in writing, but this year we took first place in grammar, and now we're finding people that discover us because someone told them about the grammar program, not the writing one.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've recommended specifically the grammar program, because it's people come there, and I hate it, and my kids hate it, and it's an awesome program. I do have a question for you. I'm going to poke at you guys a little bit.
Sure.
Sentence diagramming. So the people that I will recommend Fix It to, they're like, but there's no diagramming. So my question is why is there no diagramming? Will there ever be diagramming? And do we really need diagramming?
You've opened up a can of worms that we don't have time to fully devour. But
Okay.
what I would say is I have no objections to sentence diagramming,
Okay.
but I am not convinced that it is the best use of time. I also am aware that grammar is an art and not a science. We try to teach grammar like it's a science, like, okay, if you learn all this and you practice diagramming, you're going to be able to do this in a consistent way that everyone would agree on is the truth. The problem is it's not like that. I could give you a 5-word sentence that defies being diagrammed consistently by different people. And the reason is because there are different opinions, and English is very messy. I mean, we have a constitution that's called Latin and Greek, and then we've got case law, which is whatever else anybody decided to do. Grammar is the first of the liberal arts, right? It's the first of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So if you think of grammar as an art isn't something you learn and know and carry around in your head like knowledge. An art is something that you do. And so with a fix-it, you're actually doing things with those sentences that have embedded errors and need labels. And I'll tell you this straight out. If you want to understand the deep structure of language, don't study English grammar, study a different language. Latin. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I taught Latin for 6 years, and I'll tell you, in the last 3 years, I learned more English grammar than I probably knew in my whole life previous to that. And I've been teaching writing for 20.
I believe it. Yeah. And you're right. English is so messy. We were just at an autism training, and there were people from 16 different countries there. It was beautiful. But we were talking to somebody, he's asking questions about our language. He's like, wow, that's got to be so confusing. I said, yeah, it really is. So, I mean, you're right. English is probably one of the worst to learn about grammar. I think probably what people are wanting, from my experience, it's more of the basics of diagramming, like the subject predicate.
Right.
I think that might be more of a simplified, I don't know, maybe does that pop up in any, we've not done all the Fix-It books, but.
Well, if you get through Fix-It 5, let alone Fix-It 6, you'll know more grammar technicalities. You'll be a better proofreader, and you'll know more grammar than 99.9999999% of all English-speaking people on Earth. I mean,
I'm sure.
that Fix-It 5 and 6 is so challenging, I can't even do it. And I occasionally meet some teenagers who are doing Fix-It 6, and I'm just like, I should bow down to you in awe. But it's kind of like there's sufficient grammar to get by, and then there's grammar that you start to get excited about because you're seeing a deeper structure. You know how Lewis talks about the deep magic in Narnia?
Yeah.
This is like, grammar is like the deep magic of language. But
I love that.
You can't, I don't think you're going to get there through a mechanical way. You almost have to get there through a poetic way. So I'm not opposed to, like I said, I'm not opposed to sentence diagramming. I'm just not sure it's the best use of time, especially if it's something that you're not enjoying. If a kid says, well, I really love this diagramming stuff, great, go for it. It's a wonderful way to learn. But, I'm not sure that it's the best way for everyone. But I have found that almost every child who didn't like whatever grammar they were doing does like the Fix-It, and the parents believe they're learning, as much or more because of the methodology we use. But, people can read about that on our website.
Right. Yeah, it's much more practical for sure. We love that. Okay, so your flagship product, you said the writing, obviously, Fix-It, and then do you have another favorite besides the poetry?
The poetry. We have, I love everything we have. Probably, one thing that you might enjoy trying, if you haven't, it's along the lines of that, having a little gathering and reciting fables, is our speech boot camp. It's designed
Okay.
for kids about 12 and up, and it's kind of a 4-part, learn to write a speech, practice your speech, deliver your speech, and critique other people's speeches. And I've had a lot of parents say, oh, their child was not very interested in a public speaking class, but they used the video with a group of kids and they really enjoyed it. So, that's along those lines. We also have early reading and writing, our primary arts of language program, and I have a high school essay intensive, and then we have some games, and actually the list goes on. Learn the structure and style writing program, and everything flows from there.
Wonderful. All right. So any news to share? Do you have any new products coming out, or are you going to be at, I'm sure you will be. You're always at some conference or another, right?
Yeah, if I were to tell you the top secret news, I'd have to kill you. So can't do that. But we do have some very exciting things in the works.
Good.
Along with a redesign of the website. Hopefully we'll have all these things pretty well lined up by the end of this year. But I'll be Fort Wayne, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Lansing, Michigan, Orlando, Florida. I always love doing that one. North Carolina, Virginia, HAV, then to Ontario, California, then up to, is it in Eugene? I think it's in Eugene. It's the Oregon Christian Education Network, Ocean, Rocky Mountain Catholic Home Educators, and then Arizona, and then we finish up with New York and Florida for a great homeschool conference. So you can see my calendar on our website under events. And so if any of your listeners are at any of those conventions or conferences, please come and have a chat with me if you like.
All right. So where can we find you online?
We have Institute for Excellence in Writing is a Facebook page. That's where we announce a lot of business-related stuff. I, of course, have Andrew Pudewa. There's only one of me. Actually, there's another one. He just kind of grew up. He was a kid. I met him once when he was like 4 years old. Now he's a young adult.
How funny.
Yeah, rare name, but and I don't do Twitter, but people who work for me do Twitter, so look for that. But best place, and our podcast, Arts of Language, on all the major podcast platforms, where you can get all the information about everything from our main website, iew.com.
Yeah, and you guys, aren't you on Instagram? You're on Instagram too, right?
Oh man, if we
Someone
are.
who works for you is on Instagram. Yeah. You guys will put great quotes up there. I love that. And you'll say, what novel? And kind of get us thinking.
Yeah, I know I pay someone to do that, but I don't have a single clue as to how it's done.
Right. Well, it's all going well. I enjoy it. So, all right. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show today. I loved getting to speak to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and you keep up your good work of encouraging moms, and hopefully we will meet up in person someday.
That sounds great. Thanks so much for listening to Homeschooling Outside the Box. If you are loving the show, please consider heading over to iTunes and leaving a review. This is a really great way to help other moms find out about the show so they can be encouraged and equipped just like you are. For more encouragement for yourself, head over to cindyrenna.com. I've got blog posts on there. You can listen to past episodes of the podcast, and there's even a shop if you're looking for something to help equip you more in your homeschool. Things like book lists and a nature journal and all sorts of fun stuff. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk with you soon. Bye-bye.